you gotta, when that kind of thing happens, you gotta go, wait a minute. What's going on? I mean, that's. Did you see the Mel Gibson podcast, the Rogan podcast? Marcus, are there any limitations on the questions we can ask other than like, some personal thing?
Yeah, you stay away from health issues,
Yeah.
mental health, anything personal.
It can be philosophical.
Absolutely.
Okay.
You just gotta ask the same question every time then.
Yeah.
All right. I'd like to call to order this special called meeting work session for January 29th, 2025. Ms. Johnson, if you'll call
Mr. Hill,
here.
Mr. Daniels,
Here.
Mr. Holbrook,
Here.
Dr. Kubot,
Here.
Mr. Knight, Mrs. Purvis. Here. Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Do I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Mr. Holbrook, do I have a second?
Second.
A motion by Mr. Holbrook and a second by Mr. Daniel. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Agenda is approved. Ms. Johnson, if you will bring in our first interview. Just to give some background, while Ms. Johnson goes to get our first interviewee, we've set interviews for tonight for the District 3 School Board seat. We're going to ask a series of questions. There were a total of 12 applicants, and we narrowed it down to 4 to interview and 1 backed out. So tonight we're going to have 3 that we interview. We're going to be asking a series of questions. We're going to do 30 minutes each. Each interviewee will come in, and then once they've been interviewed, they will go back to the back, and at the end, this board will go into closed session to go and make a decision and come out and make a motion to appoint. All right, welcome, sir.
Hey, how's it going?
Great. If you will, tell us your name and one thing you want us to remember about you.
My name is Stephen Hill, and I want to remember for this school board, I'm a New London Academy, Forest Middle School JF alumni, proud of my time in Bedford County Schools, and excited to be interviewing with this.
Mr. Knight?
Good evening.
Hey, how's it going?
My question for you is, I'd like for you to please describe your idea of the best form of government.
A constitutional representative democracy is my ideal of the best form. I would consider myself more on the conservative with a libertarian bend, so the government that governs best governs least. So kind of an approach to government to where you are empowering the people that are already there to make those decisions, but also empowering the constituency to improve their area with themselves without government interference at all possible.
Okay.
What would be the main thing you want to accomplish on the board?
My main thing, and I've been following this for years, is Bedford County has a reversion coming up in a couple of years. Where we've got a cliff that we're going to come off of, and you guys have done a great job at preparing for that. But $7.5 million saved up is great for that first year, but it's going forward on that. That is I'm a residential land developer, run with a concrete company. What I do is, manage multi-million-dollar projects, and I understand the complexities in doing budgets like that, and understand, where to, cut, where to raise revenue, where to make those issues, because I think that's the biggest threat to us. If we, lose almost $8 million in operating capital, it's gonna have to cut something, and if you can make a plan to get that cut earlier to where you soften the blow, it makes it a whole lot easier.
door. Ms. Purvis?
So what do you feel would be your strengths that you could bring to the board and what may be your weaknesses?
I gotcha. My strengths are I'm very fiscally conservative, very numbers oriented. I joke with my wife, my love language is Excel spreadsheets. I love a good Excel spreadsheet. And so, being able to to look at the data, look at the information that is provided, to see where it's most strategic to make good cuts, where it's strategic to grow, to expand, and how to balance all of that with meeting the public need for providing the service to the public. My weakness, honestly, in a school board capacity, is curriculum. I've been in the business world for a long time. I really understand that portion of it. I'm very weak on curriculum. My sister is a teacher at Forest Middle School, and we have those conversations, and she loses me entirely when it comes to the education side of things. It's probably one of my bigger weaknesses.
How are you this evening?
Doing great, man.
Kurt Hubach. What is your overall impression of Bedford County Schools?
So like I said, I went to Bedford County Public Schools growing up. I started in third grade at New London Academy and graduated JF in 2004. Loved my time there, loved my time with the teachers there. My family is very invested in Bedford County Schools. My mother was a paraprofessional for years. My sister is going on her 20th year as a public school teacher at Forest Middle School. When I built my house, when I decided on where I wanted to live, me and my wife decided to build in Bedford County so that we can send our kids to Bedford County Public Schools. Invested in not only is it succeeding for the greater good, but on a micro level for my own children. I've got a third grader, a first grader, and a 3, almost 4-year-old. So I'm gonna be in the school system a long time, and so I want to make sure that it is producing the best, not only for my children, but for all the children of Bedford County. Also, as a land developer, I understand the importance of a good school system. I understand that if you're wanting to raise revenue, if you want to raise tax value, a good school system is the number one selling point. When I look at land to purchase, one of the first things I look at is how's it going to sell, and one of the first things is school system there.
How you doing?
Doing great, man.
Doing good. One of the things about this job is that you try to gather all the information that you can before you make a decision. You have to understand that when you make a decision, it's going to make some people happy and some people not. Knowing that, what life and work experiences do you have that would help you approach these situations, and how would that help you guide your decision making?
Gotcha. So I, as a land developer, also my other job is I run a concrete company. So those every day you're having to make decisions between employees and customers and vendors. Obviously we're all beholden to the bottom line, but we also want to have great relationships with everyone that we interact with. And so it is balancing that. It's balancing from the land development side. It's balancing governmental forces. It's market forces, realtors, builders, that whole gamut there. You're trying to always make sure that you're protecting our own self, but also keeping everybody happy as best you can. And sometimes you can do that, and sometimes you can't. But focusing on what's most important, and what's most important is continuing the job that you start out.
So, as an answer to my first question, you said that, small government, power to the people, representative republic, or democracy is what you feel is the ideal type of government. How can you practically and potentially better than others contribute to this form or philosophy of government?
I gotcha. Like I said, District 3, I grew up in. I know District 3. I know it well. I also am very open to others' opinions. I've been in front of this board several times, give my own opinion on things. And so being able to I have kids in the school. I'm able to not only know from gathering information from constituents, but also seeing it on the ground. Seeing how the decisions that this board makes affects how my kids are at school and how they are how they interact with that. So I guess my biggest thing for that type of government, representative government, is gathering information from constituencies, doing what's best, understanding there is a loud minority, but also a portion that needs to be heard and needs to be expressed out there, even if it is from the loud minority.
So this takes a lot more time than you would think it does. I'll tell you that right now. So do you feel that you would be able to meet the time requirements and
Yes, sir, yeah.
being that you run the business and
Yeah,
the home
absolutely.
too?
And I've talked with my partners about that, and we've kind of all agreed to see how this works out. I before I even applied for this, I talked to Mr. Nelms for a good while, just saying, hey, what is the time commitment for it? Because that was my first question: is hey, what's the time commitment here? And going through that, speaking with obviously my most important boss, my wife, and determining how that it would affect our family. We all kind of agreed that this is something that we think. And I think Bedford County Schools is important enough to make those sacrifices.
Ms. Purvis?
How do you feel about Chromebooks in the classroom and outside of the classroom?
Well,
That's
actually-
been a big hot topic.
I got you. I don't know if it's a hot topic, but I literally, at New London Academy, we have something called the Watchdog program. So I just spent the day on Monday in the schools, and that was one of the things that I observed. I'm not anti-technology, but I also think that there needs to be a limit to it. The use of it in the classrooms, especially in the elementary school, was relatively minimal. But in between lessons and stuff like that, it was used often. I'm not a huge fan of at least at the elementary school level where I have the most interaction with of taking them home. The more I can get my kids away from technology in the evening, the better for me. And so I think that Chromebooks have a place. Technology has a place in the classroom. It just has to be limited and has to be not leaned on as a crutch, but used as an advantage.
You have already told us that you've got some close ties to Bedford County Schools because of your experience personally, because of family that's on staff, kids that are in the school. Conflicts will arise where there are personal interests at stake, maybe in opposition to what needs to be done. How would you handle a situation like that?
Obviously, I know a couple years ago we had a district rezoning or a rezoning proposal, and I was vehemently against it. Those are on the board probably saw me speak a couple times about that. If something like that arose where it directly conflicted with my personal viewpoints or opinions as far as how it would affect me, I think the best move is to recuse yourself from those type of decisions. If you've got a conflict of interest, the best thing, especially in a government where you want transparency and in a government where you want your leaders to not act within their own personal interest, but for the greater societal good, I think you have to recuse yourself in those issues.
Thank you.
One of the things here in the county that I'm sure that you're aware is that our goal is to try to prepare kids for whatever their next step in life is, if that's college or career. We have, as a board, have worked pretty hard on our CTE program. Can you just let us know your thoughts on that and if there's any other things you think that we should be doing?
Yeah, big fan of the trade schools. Obviously, I'm in concrete, I'm in construction. So we have a major lack of skilled tradesmen out there right now. And it's affecting everything from housing supply to, repairs and any type of work you're trying to do, all of the guys I work with have long wait lists. And so I think it's very important to be offering those educationals, offering different types of, I forgot my word there, different type of accreditations, whether it's plumbing or electrical or roofing or obviously concrete. And so I think it's very important that we enable the trade school to take more of those students out. When I grew up, it was you either went to college or nothing. I remember teachers telling us that if you didn't go to college, you were going to be a failure. And I think, obviously I went to college, I got a bachelor's degree. I've realized that now that I've gotten into the world and I'm in the construction world, I understand, some of the smartest people I know are, never finished high school. And so I think there's a lot of value in empowering those students that maybe they're not going down the academic path, but they have a valuable place in our society. And I think to prepare them for that future is a great use of our county resources there.
Thank you. All right, so you guys have each asked 2 questions with follow-up questions. Did anybody have third questions or any additional information that's needed? No. Okay, all right, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Okay, I appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
I asked you if you had additional questions.
No, I just.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Hello, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. If you will, tell us your name and one thing you want us to remember about you.
Okay, my name is Dina Jones. Thank you for having me here. I would like you to remember that I have dedicated not only my career, but much of my personal life to education and community involvement.
Good evening. So my question for you is, I'd like for you to please describe your idea of the best form of government.
Okay, thank you. I believe that the best form of government, if you are, speaking at the school board level, I believe that the best form of government is a group of leaders who listen to their constituents, who understand their role as wise and discerning stewards, and who remember who they are there to serve, why they are there to serve, and remain transparent and open in all of their actions in government.
How you doing?
Hi.
So what would be the main thing that you would like to accomplish on the board?
Well, I think the board does a great job. I think one area where in my interim role, though it be just an interim role, I think that there's still a lot that can be accomplished. And I think we have some of the best educators and some of the best teachers anywhere. And I would love, as you saw in my application, to open up additional channels or be a part of the people who hear regular feedback from our instructors, from our staff members. I think we have so many opportunities. I think that our staff members and our teachers in our schools are often the very first people who see an issue that may be arising. And I believe that in my role, I would love to accomplish being someone who listens and who is part of avenues of feedback from the teachers and staff to the board. I've done that in other community roles, and I know that I could do that here.
So, what do you feel would be your strengths if we appoint you, and then also your weaknesses?
Absolutely. One of my strengths is that I have a very interdisciplinary perspective. If you saw my application, you know that my background is a mixture of I'm trained and I've practiced in clinical mental health. I have over a decade as an educator at the university level. I have worked in curriculum development. I have advised nonprofits on marketing and fundraising and strategic planning. So I believe a big strength that I have is that my experience in these different areas can be blended together and applied here, because in an organization like a school board, you often need multidisciplinary solutions, and you often need stakeholders from different areas, your businesses and your educators. So I think that I am perfectly poised to give those blended perspectives and to pull from my different areas of experience. And then you ask as well about a weakness. I believe that it would be great to have even more K-12 experience on the board. I have a decade of course development and professional development and teaching at the university level. I wish I had more hands-on experience in the classroom with our K-12 students, and my plan to overcome that is that I listen to teachers, I listen to staff members. I am very good at identifying the people who have had the experiences that I haven't had and listening to and learning from and collaborating with them.
Kurt Hubach, wanted to ask you about your overall impression of Bedford County schools as they are today.
I think that Bedford County schools, we very intentionally moved to this area. So I love Bedford County schools, and next year I'm going to have one student at elementary, one student at middle, and one student at high school. So I feel like that gives me, with the parents and the teachers and the administration I'm connected to, I get to see a lot of levels. I'm also the president of the council PTA, so if anyone is newer to that term, it's just when all the PTA presidents come together from all the Bedford County public schools, all the principals and PTA presidents come together, and I'm the president of that board and that group. So I have seen strengths at all levels, and I think that we are a district that sometimes we forget what incredible resources we have, because I think we have just incredible educators. I was sitting waiting to come into this interview, just chatting with other applicants, and what was coming up was just talking about some of the incredible teachers that we have. So I think that while I look at our district and I see that we have a lot of challenges, there are a lot of areas where solutions are needed, I think that we have what it takes and what we need within our people and resources here.
Good evening. One of the things about this job that I happens all the time is you gather as much information as you can and try to make the best decision that you can. ultimately, those decisions, they impact everybody. So some people are going to be very happy with those decisions, some people are going to be upset. Knowing that, what life or work experiences do you have that would help you approach those situations and also would help guide your decision-making?
Yeah, and it's so hard. I think everyone in this room knows, I've read it, I've heard it. If you want to be a leader, you have to be willing to be misunderstood by the people that you're working so hard to help and that you're working so hard for, and it's just going to happen. No one gets to be in leadership and gets to not have that experience. So I have been in leadership at different levels, PTA levels, nonprofit organizations. One experience that really guides me in so many ways, a few years ago, I was able to head up the event coordination of events that helped organizations and people respond to the opioid epidemic. So if you remember a few years back, that was just a huge problem facing everyone. All demographics were being impacted by the opioid epidemic. And I got to work in 4 different states and be the connecting person between the Department of Health and Human Services, the American Association of Christian Counselors, which is a local organization, and grassroots organizations in North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and California. And we went to these different grassroots organizations and we brought in private counselors, we brought in government resources, and we trained firemen, police officers, teachers on what to do about the opioid epidemic, prevention, just noticing when someone might have a problem, stopping the epidemic from spreading further. And in that work, because I was able, on one hand I'm working with a government organization, on one hand I'm working with a private organization of counselors, on the other hand I'm working with the local churches and the fire departments and the people that wanted us to come. And being in that role showed me so much how we're coming from different perspectives and we're coming from different backgrounds, but so much of the time we all want the same thing. And that taught me so much to look for the common ground, to remember the purpose, to find the unity in why we're here, because often if you can get to that, usually there are points to connect on and you can kind of work backwards from that shared purpose.
So, as an answer to my first question, you sort of described what you feel like is the ideal government, in particular for at the school board level. How do you think that you would practically and potentially better than others be able to contribute to that ideal form of government?
Yeah, I love to talk practical. I know that you probably saw in my application that I'm an advisor for nonprofits, and I don't want to come off as if I'm just theoretical or if I'm just an advocate, because I like to be a person who physically gets work done, who physically walks into the schools. I've joked with the administration at New London Academy that they could create a blooper reel of me coming into the school, because in the fall I'm coming in with like a bunch of pumpkins, and in the spring I'm coming in with a bunch of markers. And I like to not just be a person who strategizes, which I am and I can be, but I like to be in person and talk to the people that the policies that I'm making are impacting. I would like to, within the next 2 months, I would like to be appointed, and then I would like to, within the next 2 months, visit or revisit all of our Bedford County public schools. I said earlier that I think we just have some of the most wonderful people here, and I would like to be someone who seeks first to listen and seeks to understand in order to be understood.
So this job takes more time than would be expected. Do you think you'd be able to make the sacrifices required to take the position?
Yes, sir, I do. I was talking about that last night, and I think that I am aware, I think I'm more aware than most of the significant amount of responsibility. I've been in roles before where it's a lot more work than it looks like. And I hope that you know that I see your hard work, I appreciate it, I respect it, and yes, sir, I am ready.
So how do you feel about Chromebooks in and outside of the classroom? And just, are they effective? What are your thoughts about them?
I think it certainly varies by level. I believe that, our high schoolers, many of them are a year, months away from being in a workforce where they are going to be on their computers often in many of the roles that some of our students will choose. I also, as an educator, I know that there are many different types of learning, and the younger that we get, at the more elementary level, I love when I still see them not on the Chromebook, but I see them engaging in learning activities where they are physically moving their bodies, where they're listening, where they're engaging all of their senses. So I believe that the implementation of Chromebooks should be incremental. I believe that a reliance on them in the elementary ages is, could be detrimental if overused. And, I also think that it's important to remember, we still need to connect. Our students still need emotional intelligence. So not over relying on the Chromebooks, I believe, is important. We still need to be able to listen to someone giving a presentation. Research shows writing down our handwritten notes does lead to better memory retention than typing out our notes. So I believe that it's important to continue to look at what the research says about the use of technology coming from an educational perspective.
You have shared with us that you've got many roles already within the school system as a mom at all three different levels and PTA. There will be times where there's conflict between decisions that need to be made here and where the rubber hits the road. And how will you handle those kinds of conflicts?
I am aware of that, and I have been in roles before where you have to have a clear lineation, and you have to, be willing in leadership to make sacrifices, and sometimes, those sacrifices are that you don't get to share every bit of information you have. Sometimes those sacrifices are you have to just physically miss being at a place that you would rather be at. Sometimes those sacrifices are that you have to look at a situation from different perspectives that may not be understood. I understand that there are conflicts between perspectives in different places, and I know that it won't always be easy, but I do feel that I am prepared to be an excellent board member and to be not only transparent but also very committed to my role on the board.
Here we believe that whether when you're getting ready to graduate, our job is to try to train you for your next steps, which is going to be either college or career. A lot of that also has to do with, we have a robust CTE program. Just give us kind of your thoughts on that when it's coming to kids and which path they decide to take, and is there anything in that program, anything that we're doing over there that if we're not doing that we should be doing?
That's a great question. I'm going to try not to talk too much about this because, as you know, on my application, my background is in career development. I was a career counselor, so I'll try not to sit here and talk about our young people's careers for the rest of the night. But from a career development perspective, what a lot of career theorists talk about is how careers, it used to be like an elevator, or it used to be like a car, where you take your path, you get on, and you continue moving up. Or you get in a car, you're going to a destination, and you keep going. And the way that careers work today is that there are often a lot more lateral moves. It's like taking an Uber to the airport, and careers, you see people changing industries so much more. You see people in dual roles so much more. You see people in hybrid roles so much more. I think it's incredibly important to keep our students aware of the opportunities. I mean, our students who are in high school right now, we might have a third of them who want to do jobs that might not have existed when some of us were in high school, you know? So I think that it's very important to have, and we do this, but to continue the relationships that we have with the professionals and the trades and all the different industries, to continue those strong relationships with businesses who can come in and talk to our students and give that real world application and communication. I think that we do well, and I just want to see that grow.
That's all.
All right,
Thank
well,
you so
thank you all
much.
very much, thank you.
Welcome. If you will, tell us your name and one thing you want us to remember about you.
Ooh, my name is Joseph Veras, and one thing you remember about me is I have 6 kids, 6 boys who I truly love, 2 sets of twins, and I'm 35 with the gray hair that I have because of all of their lovely spirits. They're great.
Good evening.
Hey.
Could you please describe your idea of the best form of government?
The best form of government. I truly believe that those in places of leadership within our government really should be listening to the voices of the people who have put them there to represent them. I believe, this is probably my biblical background and values, but in servant leadership, and that you're there to be able to serve the people who you've been called to lead for whatever time that is, and to be able to make an impact that positively changes the community. I believe that I believe in the voices of parents, if we're talking about government in the context of the school division, the voices of parents to be able to be heard. I believe that a lot happens within the home of forming citizens, young people who are going to be growing up and living in their communities and being leaders in them, and perhaps one day being in positions of authority in government as well. And so I think some of that formation starts at home, and then from the perspective of those who are in authority, I think realizing that you've been entrusted with responsibilities to guide and lead, and with the best conscience that you have to be able to make the decisions that you believe that is leaving the world better than what you found it.
Or what would be the main thing you'd want to accomplish as a board member?
I think the way that I just ended the last question, being able to leave something better than I found it. I know that this position, this appointment is only guaranteed the next 11 months, and that might be it. And so it might just be a short time that I perhaps could help influence or bring to light certain perspectives that would be helpful for our community, for our schools. And so I think that in everything that I would do, I approach it with humility, to be able to listen to various viewpoints and sides on the issue. I'm sure that there's never been different expressions announced in this room from members of the community, but I feel like I have the ability to hear both sides and be able to come to a decision that I can make clearly and confidently and in good conscience. And so I think for whatever time I might be afforded in this position, I would just want to be able to do things that provide students with the best educational opportunities possible, to give our teachers and schools the resources that they need to do that, and to really be able to contribute to raising the next generation of leaders here in our community. I've seen it in my professional experience and being able to travel internationally and seeing in so many different parts of the world that education really is key to breaking down so many barriers, cycles of poverty, and giving children the best chances to obtain an education and to make a difference in their world. And so if I could play any part in that, that's what I would hope to accomplish.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Dora Purvis. What do you feel would be your strengths in this kind of situation on our board, and what would be your weaknesses?
I think from a strength perspective, I'm very administrative, just kind of by nature in my personality, and being able to do tasks. I have the ability to kind of zoom out and kind of see the whole picture and just think if we have a certain goal that we'd like to come to, what are the steps that we need to take in order to accomplish that goal. So I believe that I can zoom out as well for that. Like I said, I think I have the ability to kind of put aside my own presuppositions or, on a subject and be able to listen to different perspectives. I lived overseas for a period of a couple of years. I was an instructor at a seminary, and first of all, that was my first time teaching. Never taught before, so that was a brand new experience, creating curriculum and teaching, but then also teaching in a cross-cultural setting for the very first time, and I'd never been in that culture or anything like that. And so I really had to understand different viewpoints, different worldviews from my own. In order to meet them where they're at, I needed to understand their position as best as possible. And so I think through some of that experience, translating to this role, I think that would be a strength in order to just listen to the different voices of our community and come to a decision. And you asked weaknesses as well. Any weaknesses? I know that some matters that come before the board require immediate decisions or timely decisions. I know that there are other things that might be postponed or just delayed for further discussion or research or whatever. I'm very much an internal processor, and like I said, trying to weigh the pros and cons and see the different viewpoints. And so if I need to make a decision, I think I can come to one quickly and confidently, but I don't want to overthink too much. But I think if I had to say something as far as weakness, maybe just overthinking or giving too much time to something.
Mr. Harris, I'm Kurt Hubach. Wanted to ask you about your overall impression of Bedford County Public Schools as they are today.
Well, in my experiences with my children, my oldest is in 5th grade at Thomas Jefferson, I have a fourth grader, I have twins who are in second grade, and then I'll have my last set of twins who will be coming through to Thomas Jefferson the year after, the next school year after the next one. So Thomas Jefferson Elementary teachers are kind of my basis of reference there. And I can say that we've had nothing but positive experiences with every teacher that we had. I feel like from our interactions with them that they're supported, that they're valued there. And I can honestly say that none of our kids have really had any complaints about their teachers. And so my experience with Bedford County teachers in the schools has been very positive. I myself am a product of Bedford County schools, was raised and came through Forest Elementary, Forest Middle, and I was at Jefferson Forest. Just met Dr. Cornett in the hallway here, and he was, I think his first year at JF was in his class there in Algebra, and I know Dr. Calvert was a principal there, overlapping same time, even though you probably don't know me, which means I stayed out of trouble. But I truly believe that the Bedford County schools that I kind of came up through really did shape me into the person that I am today and did set me up for successes. I've seen a lot of change that's happened for the better, and more opportunities that are even afforded to students now that weren't necessarily opportunities that we had in programs of study or curriculum back when I was in school. And so I think, I don't have high schoolers yet, but I think it just seems like we're doing a very good job of preparing people, not only with like head knowledge, but technical skills and just resources, like practical knowledge as well, that are coming through different things. And I know teachers have a lot to do with that as well, in the way that they care and interact with the students and being able to shape and mentor and mold as well the students that are coming through there. And so I'm proud to have my kids in public school, and we have friends who are like, how are you gonna do middle school next year with your, because we have some friends who have bailed out and gone to homeschool or private school or something like that. And I said, we've just had such great experiences, and it's different. Kids are getting older. The world is not as safe as or innocent as it was so many years ago. But just hope and pray that they continue to be upstanding young men. And I'd want that the same for anyone coming through our schools.
Thanks for being here. And you kind of talked about this a little bit, but one of the things about this job is that you try to gather all the information that you can, process it, and make the best decision that you can. That decision makes sometimes a lot of people happy, and sometimes a lot of people not so happy. Knowing that, what experiences that you have from life and work that would help you approach these situations, and then how would that help you guide your decision making?
So I think the heart of your question is kind of how you deal with conflict, maybe in a way. We don't never have conflict, do we? This is being recorded, so who knows for posterity and talking about work experiences, what might be there. But I know kind of where I am in my professional employment at World Help in Forest, a humanitarian aid organization. I've been there for 8 years and I've loved it all. But of course, there are certain times where decisions are going to be made that you don't necessarily agree with. And in my position, kind of as an assistant director level, I have the director who's kind of the go-between between kind of like executive team and then kind of us who fall beneath that. And there are some times where I either make suggestions or prepare certain things or make certain plans that then can be changed last minute. I don't agree with it, but I abide by it and live with it. I was supposed to be taking an international trip next week. It got canceled, kind of bummed, but you know, that's the way it is. And so I'm very much so that I personally like to have all of the facts and being able to, if we have data, to look at data in order to make a decision and make a compelling case. And I realize that on this school board, not every vote is unanimous, some votes are split. And I think that there is beauty in having disagreements with one another. That really helps sharpen us and learn from one another, and just being able to, I think, help refine our own positions and understanding of certain things. So I think that there is some healthy conflict that's good on both sides, but I'm one that if I'm able to make sure that my side is known, my views are known, and making sure that all parties involved can kind of understand each other and where they're coming from. I think there's an ability though to be able to make your decisions or cast your votes or whatever it may be. And you could be on two different sides of it, but in the end, that doesn't mean you shut down and you stop working together, but enables you to just continue going forward. Because I would hope, and I know it's true in my workplace, we all have the same desires and goals, and we all want to be rowing in the same direction. Sometimes people want to take different paths, and I think here for the school board as well, we all want what's best for our children, and for the children who are in our schools. And so there might be differences in opinion of how we go about it, but would love to seek to know what someone else's position is, their thoughts on it, and talk about it and come to a decision. Did that answer all parts of your question?
Thank
So you sort of answered this already with some of your other answers, but maybe I can probe a little bit deeper.
Sure.
My first question, you answered my first question as to the type of government that you feel is best, and you sort of basically said, a government in which the leaders are listening and hearing from their people and representing them, right? So my follow-up question is, how can you practically and potentially better than others contribute to that type of leadership?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not ashamed that I'm a believer and raised in a Christian background, and I think a lot of that influences the way that I lead, whether it's in my family or lead at work or in other situations where I find myself. And I truly believe that servant leadership is the way that we should be leading people, and realizing that we're all blessed beyond measure, and being able to realize that we've been entrusted with certain resources that we can have and that are ours to steward. And being in a position of leadership, it's not about gaining knowledge or power or anything for yourself, but being able to empower and share that with as many people as possible. Can you repeat your question just to make sure I'm fully answering the line of questioning that you'd like to go down?
Sure, yeah, and I think you are, but
Okay.
I was just basically asking how you could practically, right? Because sometimes we can answer things very theoretically, but we can't really describe how we would practically accomplish those things, right? And so, what would you do to be able to lead in the way that you think is the best way to lead, which is a representative leader?
Yeah.
What would you practically do to accomplish that?
Well, I'll be the first to admit that there are certain things practically about the role of a school board member that I might not fully know at this point, and there might be things, I know that there's things that happen outside of the cameras that are in here, which I've been looking the whole time and trying to see where the views are of, because I've seen cameras at different angles at different school board meetings before. And so I'll admit that there's more that I don't know. I think practically leading, I would want to. So I was the recent school board that was talking about the different projects and renovations and stuff at Liberty and St. River. In order to, I think, make an informed decision on something, I would have to go and see something with my own eyes. I don't want to just sit here and never be in the schools or never be in the community and never truly understand what others the pain points or something like that. So I guess in a way of leadership, but the servant leadership that I've talked about, just being willing to take that time and to go and to understand and collect answers or evidence or talk to people for myself to be able to really understand, like, is this issue being either communicated to me in the correct way, or am I understanding it in the correct way, or because I don't want to sit up here and do something that has unintended consequences. That's one of the things I had mentioned earlier. I think a strength of mine is being able to zoom out and kind of see the whole picture. And if we have a goal, what are the practical steps that we can take to that? So if I can just say maybe one thing practically as it comes to issues of the school board and anything that might come against it, I'd love to be able to talk with people and to see, feel, touch, whatever the issues that are kind of being brought forward. Because I think that helps make that well-rounded decision. You're not just relying on the reports of other people, but being able to see and verify firsthand and experience.
You kind of said you'd like to go out and do the things and look at them and see them and stuff. Do you think you're gonna be able to have the time required to be an involved board member?
Yeah, I truly do. I'm lucky enough as far as my full-time job goes that it's very, you're still required the 40 hours and things like that. But if I had to take time off in the middle of the day, in the morning, in the afternoon, my schedule is like flexible enough where I'm actually able to do that. So I'm sure, I know everyone has their own things that they're doing and you guys all have to balance that as well. But a short answer, yes, I feel like with my current work and then life balance as well, especially if it's during the school day and kids are in school, but being able to see and do the things that are needed for the board during the week. Obviously, there's these evenings that are happening with all the meetings and certain other things that I'm sure committees and meetings that happen in other times. But I don't know the full scope of everything, but from what I kind of see and know myself, I do believe that I can do that. Do effectively.
So how do you feel about Chromebooks inside and outside of the classroom and their place?
I don't have any problem with them. I think obviously our world is becoming ever more technological and I believe that we need to provide our students with the resources that they need to be successful. And obviously when it comes to computers, that's just a very necessary part of our world moving forward. The Chromebooks that like my 4th and 5th graders have had, for the most part, they stay at school. I don't know if that's a normal thing, if it varies from school to school as far as the implementation of it, but I don't feel like without them, I'm not teaching my kids computer skills at home, and shoot, they could probably teach me some things after learning on there. So I don't have any issue with the Chromebooks in schools. It's I know you're getting ready to ask something, but it's just different because like my oldest sons sometimes say taking tests on there and they're like, oh yeah, I scored such and such. I was like, how do you know your grade already? Your teacher didn't grade it. And I'm realizing that just things are being done differently as well now with using the technology, aiding the teachers in some of it as well, but they're getting comfortable with it.
Thank you. You've got a bunch of kids in the school system, and there will be times where decisions need to be made as a board member that may be in opposition to what may be best for your family. From that perspective, how would you handle that kind of conflict?
Yeah, I think I'm very much like a factual person, and when it comes to data and spreadsheets, that's kind of my love language in a way. That speaks to me, and so I think I could have personal feelings on something just because practically, and this is, you know, either easier or whatever it be, but when you're looking at data that is perhaps irrefutable, that's just how I'm wired as far as making decisions, and would make as a decision in the school board that, you know, I know, Mr. Hill, you were here through all the throes of COVID, and I think a couple maybe were in part of that, and those are hard decisions as far as masking and distancing and all of those things. And did I agree with all of the decisions? No, but I'm sure that there was also data and other just practical considerations that, taken as a whole, makes sense that you need to make this decision and make it in this way. So again, I think I can consider different perspectives, and even if I had to make a decision that might affect me in a way that makes it more difficult or whatever it be, that's just how I'm gonna have to look at it and make decisions that way.
Thank you.
All right. So in Bedford County Public Schools, our job, we feel, is to get our kids ready for that next stage of life when they're getting ready to leave, whether that's going to be college or it's going to be career. We have a pretty robust CTE program with trades. I just want to know kind of your thoughts on that, and is there anything that we are not offering that we could in a CTE program, or how would we expand it, or anything that we're not doing that we should be doing?
Yeah. I'll be honest up front, I don't know the full scope of all the CTE offerings that the county has. And I'm the type of person where I'll definitely do my research and my homework should I be on the board, to be able to, one, kind of be caught up to speed, but then also be able to make informed decisions that come before the board this calendar year, if that's all that I'm able to serve, and being able to make those decisions. But as I was saying, I feel like the division now has many more opportunities than what were even available to me when I came through. And, you know, the world is shifting, and no longer is the assumed path always just high school to college. You know, you have the rise of content creators or whatever who are going through things, and so having programs in marketing, in business, in personal finance. I mean, who would have thought that, you know, there's so much that you didn't learn in school as far as just how to do your taxes or something like that. And so being able to make well-rounded people while we have them through middle and high school to be able to be successful, whether they're going to college, whether they're going to the military, whether they're pursuing these trades that are necessary and vital, and of course needing a whole generation of people to replace those who are going out. And so I think that there's high importance on that. You know, even as young as my kids are, there's a couple of them who I see who are like, probably the 4-year traditional college path is not for them, and they could be 16 and starting their lawn mowing business or whatever like that, love working with their hands. And so I think we need to have like parameters in place to be able to give all children the best opportunities possible. And some will take path A, some will take path B, some will go off to C and do something that we've never even thought of before. And I think being able to have that breadth of offerings and preparing, I mean, what's the motto? Building citizens, PS, promoting success. You know, we're building these citizens in our communities, and we want them to be successful for the future, and being able to do that as well. I've seen through, you know, my work and my travels overseas where education is not always assumed through high school, and people really have to work to stay in it and be able to continue. And university is unattainable for so many, but what is an option to so many is vocational training and different skills that can be used to start businesses and be entrepreneurs and be successful contributing citizens of society.
for questions? All right, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, appreciate it.
Do I have a motion to go into closed session?
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we go into closed session pursuant to Code of Virginia 2.2-3711A. One, for the discussion, consideration, or interviews of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of specific employees of Bedford County Public Schools.
I have a motion by Mr. Daniels. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Holbrook. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? We're in closed session.
Good to see you. I didn't know you were gonna make it today. Usually out of town on Wednesdays.
Yeah, I stayed home this week. I needed a break. My wife needed to stay home.
Good to see you, John. Office and keep it up. Some cheese too.
Do I have a motion to come out of closed session?
So moved?
I have a motion by Mr. Daniels. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Purvis. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Ms. Johnson, if you will certify.
Bedford County School Board has convened a closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. And where section 2.2-3712D of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by this school board that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law. Now therefore be it resolved that the Bedford County School Board hereby certifies that, to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements by Virginia law were discussed in the closed meeting to which this certification applies, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convened in the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered.
Yes.
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 Thank you.
And for action on closed meeting items, do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I would like to make a motion. First, I would like to thank all three of you guys for coming out and putting your hat in the ring. And I know it's not easy. I've been in that spot before. So I want to thank you guys. I want to thank everybody else that applied to serve this community. Is certainly a great honor. And it takes a lot. You talk to your families about it and see if it's going to be a good fit. So I appreciate everybody for coming out here today. And with that, though, Mr. Chair, I would like to make a motion that for the District 3 appointment, that we would appoint Stephen Hill to that position.
We have a motion by Mr. Daniels. Do we have a second?
Second.
A second by Mrs. Purvis. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Welcome, Mr. Hill. Right. Yeah. All right, we also have another motion.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I would also like to make a motion that we approve the personnel report as presented.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Daniels. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Holbrook. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. That is certified. All right. Mr. Hill,
If you want to invite him to join the
Mr.
board,
Hill,
you
you
certainly
can
can.
join for the rest of the meeting. Again, thank you very much
Thank you.
for interviewing.
Certainly.
All right. The next topic is for the Finance Committee Fiscal Year 26 recommendation. Before I turn it over to Mr. Hagler, I just want to make a comment that Mr. Daniels and I, we have spent quite a bit of time with the executive team going through this. We asked them to present, one, where are we financially? What have things looked like over the last 3 to 5 years? What are we requesting and why? And if we're not able to get that financing, then what are our options? What I want to remind everyone is this is not the final budget. This is being presented for us to have discussion. We will come back next week with any kind of tweaks that you may have or recommendations, and we will approve this budget for Mr. Hagler to take forward. So what I ask for you to do is to make sure you pay attention to the presentation as far as what's being presented. Ask questions, of course. I know you're kind of, you're going to have to spend some time, and they'll invite you this week to come in and actually go through and understand where we are in the process. So, all right, Mr. Hagler, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. And based upon your comments, I'm going to get off a script right away. So kind of explain something. The committee has worked diligently over months, looking at every single budget line item, asking questions for the purposes of just what are we doing and actually how does it impact students? I mean, that was a question that kept on coming back. Were there any efficiencies, anything we could do on that? So I appreciate the finance committee. That was a lot of meetings getting that done. When we got into January, looking at the governor's budget and where do we stand with that. And so tonight, we're going to be presenting what's coming out as a recommendation from the finance committee, from the members on there, working with executive staff. And talking about the timeline, especially for our newest member, the school board is tasked with coming up with a budget to present and do a request to the Board of Supervisors for funding. And so that's what we're going to present tonight. You'll have a week, and we're going to come back next Thursday, and the board can make changes or vote on that next week. That goes to the Board of Supervisors. The state's still working through their budget. Don't know what that's going to look like. I know what the governor's budget looks like. The House and Senate look like they're a lot different, which is better funding for schools. Don't know if that's going to transpire or not, so we'll have to watch that. They get the House and Senate together, they come into conference, they go to governor, and there's veto session and all that. So the Board of Supervisors is also considering their entire budget, the tax rate and everything, and then they'll communicate back to us what our funding is. When we've got all that back, then you come back together and we finalize our budget for next year. So that'll probably be in the, probably in April, by the time we get all said and done, if the General Assembly doesn't go into an extended session. So any questions on that timeline? We're watching the General Assembly, I'm watching the House, and I will provide information to the board as I get information from Richmond and give what the House would give us, what the Senate would give us, and just keep you updated on that, okay? So I jumped to the very end real quick, but I thought I'd give the timeline at the front. With that, as Mr. Hill was saying, we worked on a presentation with the committee and our executive staff, and we'd like to present that to the full board tonight. We've talked to a couple individuals and kind of just trying to paint a picture of where we are as Bedford County and some of the challenges and some of the things that we're going to be facing. So we're going to go through a slide deck here pretty quickly and talk about a couple items that are like pretty important. And then after that, we'll open it up for questions and some comments or other things that you may be requesting. And then we'll switch over to actually looking at the 25-26 budget. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Woodford, and she'll start us off on our slide.
It's actually
Dr. Calvert, I'm looking at you, okay.
we practiced.
I got the clicker, so I got that right.
And you have the clicker, okay. Good evening. I would like to start a discussion tonight by reviewing salaries and retention rates in Bedford County. Starting with teacher salary comparison. We currently rank 107 out of 131 in the state. And I've linked there everybody's ranking that's on the sheet if you click on state. We, in Region 5, we rank 16 out of 20 in the region. And we are off of the state average. If you're looking at beginning teacher salary, we're off about $4,175 from the average. And if you're looking at about 25 years is the worst, we're about $6,374 off from the average, meaning we are lower than the average. Mr. Hagler. So in Finance Committee, we discussed what would it take to raise our ranking in the region. So we did a calculation. The state is giving money, contributing to SOQs and the money for SOQ positions to help us get a 3% raise. So we're assuming with this calculation that every division would give a 3%. Some of them will not, and some of them will give more. But assuming the 3%, we would need to give a 7% raise to raise to number 15 out of 20. And we would need to give a 10% raise to get to number 12 out of 20. So the other thing that I did is we looked at classified wage comparison. So I went online and looked at the division salary scales from all the divisions listed here, and I looked for the lowest paid salary, the starting salary that was the lowest. And that in different divisions, that's different categories. And as you can see here, we at $13.50 are comparative to Amherst and Botetourt, but we are not to Campbell, Roanoke City, and Lynchburg. And that pay differential that we're seeing will explain the retention rate in this slide. Our retention rate for clerical staff is 92%, bus drivers is 89%, custodians 76%, paraprofessionals 69%, and nutrition 59%. That means that 41% of our nutrition staff turns over each year. They are what starts our scale at scale 104, so they are the lowest paying scale on the chart. So as you can see here, salary really does equal retention rate. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Woodford to discuss achievement and spending.
May I ask a question real quick?
Sure.
What is the retention rate among teachers?
84%. And most of the 16%, I think 68% of the 16% that we don't retain is in the first 5 years.
So similar to the trend we see with salary comparisons for our teachers and staff, when we look at achievement and per pupil expenditures, and we compare Bedford to our surrounding divisions, you can see that we also spend less money per pupil than our surrounding school districts. This amount is calculated by adding federal, state, and local allocations for education. And these numbers come from reports from the Virginia Department of Education. We currently rank 103rd in the state in per pupil expenditures for our students. I do want to say, even though our funding ranks near the bottom, we rank 36th in the state for academic achievement. So while many other school divisions spend more with lower results, I have to commend our instructional staff for their focus on academic excellence, even though their pay and resources and support may be less than other school divisions that surround us in the region and state. It's really our belief as an executive team and as an instructional team that part of the reason that our academic standing is in the top third of the state is that Bedford County prioritizes placing our funding in positions that directly affect students. The state provides funding for the standards of quality, and you'll hear us talk about SOQ positions often. One issue with state funding is that there are many state requirements for positions, programs, and training that's not supported with funding from the state. If you look at the chart here, you'll see that we have several categories of what we call SOQ positions. That first column is what we are funded by the state. So an example would be we are funded for 19 principals. Well, we have 21 schools. So we pay for 21 schools in Bedford County. So the amount over the SOQ is 1.09. So we spend about $250,000 out of our local funds in order to support making sure we have principals at every school. Therefore, when you look at this chart, I've highlighted the yellow areas because all of those areas are directly working with students. Our instructional paraprofessionals, our special education paraprofessionals, our teachers, and our VOTEC teachers. There are many other categories, but I think this really highlights what we're putting our money in. The state funds us for 5 instructional paraprofessionals. I don't know about you, but I couldn't imagine having 5 paras and splitting it between 21 schools. We have 43. That's what Bedford County funds. And so that's $1.3 million over what we're given by state and federal allocations. Special education. There is absolutely no way we would be able to support our special education students with only the 12 that we are funded for. And so we put a priority there. When you look at our priority, we spend a little over $8 million in additional positions over what the state is funding us that directly impact students. I want, yes,
Forgive my ignorance, but I'm
That's
sure
okay.
other people are gonna have this,
sure.
in the community are gonna have this question. Can you explain why we're only funded for 5 paraprofessionals or 442 teachers versus what we need?
I don't know, could you want to take that, Randy?
The state,
State said so.
the state sets the standards of quality. And so,
What criteria are
they-
they using?
good question. It's not what's happening in the schools, and there's been some discussion with the state. They're actually discussing in the General Assembly, and there's been pushback from schools that the state should really be looking at what are schools actually doing and how much does it cost, and that's how they should be coming up with their funding. But the SOQs and some of these things, and even our support positions, are arbitrarily like, no, this is all it takes. You know, like, you only need 1 custodian for a school. And it's like, or you only, it's just some things that just don't make sense. So when you look at these across the board, I'll give you one statistic I heard at a conference call, which was earlier this month in January. When you look at the state calculating what it costs to run schools in Virginia, all schools, they calculated on our calc sheets that we get funded by. And what Dr. Redford was referring to, the SOQ positions you see up there that they do support, we don't get 100% funding for those. We're picking up quite a bit of that. We have to match. What we're doing here is above that, we don't get any funding. So what they're doing there, they calculate and what they send out that it costs $11 billion to educate kids in Virginia. The actual cost is $17 billion. There's a $6 billion disconnect between what's actually happening in the schools and what the state says you need to run schools. So that's at the Richmond level, and kind of working through that and saying what you're saying is really not possible. We have to go up and above.
And there's no way to fight that. There's no way to say, no, you don't understand how many students we have or building. I mean, there's no argument there.
And this is just not us, this is every division has been making this argument. But I don't know if K-12 has gotten the cut of the pie or the attention in the last, in years past. I think there's attention there, I just don't know if that's gonna come or materialize into more funding.
I think my message to the community here is, if anyone is listening, is we should be making phone calls to our representatives in Richmond as, citizens, saying, look, this is an issue, right? And it's not something that the board can necessarily change, but or that your staff can change. But I think citizens should be reaching out to our representatives about this.
In real dollars, when you look at inflation adjusted, the state, I think, this year or next year will finally reach pre-recession levels. So when you factor in inflation, we're finally getting back to how they funded education back in 2007. So it's been a long haul after the recession before K-12's caught
Other
up.
divisions are meeting these because their local
Yes,
taxes
sir.
are higher
That's right.
than what we have here.
Yeah.
Is the main.
The locality makes sense.
Well, I
Not
mean,
that,
we're gonna share some other data, but
Not the
I
answer,
think
but-
there's there's that at the state level. It's on the SOQs, and that's in the law, that's in the budget process. Yeah.
I also think it's important that we are in touch with those that are in the General Assembly, the people who represent us at the state level. There are hundreds of bills in education that are put before them every year. When they get passed, then it's up to the school divisions to figure out how to fund that. We were looking at one bill that is getting a lot of promise that it may go through. It's going to require us to hire 2 people to cover the mandates in the law. And we were talking about that. There's no funding coming with that. There's no funding attached to the bill. So I think we try to stay up with what is happening in the General Assembly, and we are emailing our legislators, but that's important for all of us to do, I think.
As bad as that disconnect, I will show a slide later, the state has increased their funding.
Yeah.
And I'll show that over the 5 years, and I wanna be thankful for that. But it seems like it's falling behind on some things. And if you ask me why, you give a 1% raise to all teachers, it's a big number. There's a lot more employees in the school system, maybe in other departments, so you can do this here for a lot less than making a little move in education. It just takes a lot more money because it's so big, so.
Randy, and the SOQs, are they just the minimum that you have to have? Is that what that is?
Yeah,
or-
so on that chart, there's a couple things. The instructional administration at the bottom is a support position. SOQs are mandated by law, you cannot go below that. The support positions, you can. They just say this is kind of how we're gonna fund you, but you don't have to. But the SOQs you do. That's how many teachers, you cannot go below that. That's the minimum. And we're above the minimum on almost just about every position. We're above the minimum every position in the schools, so.
So,
It's just amazing. I mean, I brought it up a couple of meetings ago about the special ed paraprofessionals. And I mean, that's an eye-opening number, but if you wanna get down to something that just does not make any sense, it's principals. You have 21 schools, we have 21 principals, we're funded for 19. It's like getting on a plane and not having a pilot. I mean, it just does not make any sense. So the plane wouldn't go, neither does the school, because I mean, that just makes, it operationally makes zero sense, so.
Is that saying basically that they expect us to only have 19
Yes, ma'am.
That's what's required.
schools? That we need
That's
to
what's
close to?
required.
That's the minimum.
Assistant principals, you'd only have 6.
That's right.
For the whole division.
They're just not necessary.
the SOQs used to say principals could split between, small schools. I think now it says you have to have one at every school, but, you only get funded for 19, so.
And to be honest, for the
Yeah.
funding on that, we have 2 facilities that really don't have the student of record. You have Susie Gibson in the Alternative Ed Center. So you have some things going on there that the state doesn't recognize those facilities. So that's why there's a funding difference there.
So I do want to say that bottom category, in the past, there have really been a lot of questions from, I think, the community and the board at times about a top-heavy central office, that there are a lot of positions here. However, I think this chart shows that the state funds us for 73.3 positions that are support. Basically, they're funding for those people who are overseeing programs, doing all the state reports, doing all of the work to kind of keep things going. And as Randy said, that category is not required. That's one category we can go lower than the SOQ. And that is what our board and our executive staff have done. And we only fund 50 positions that do administrative instructional work. And we send that $2.1 million to our schools. So we recognize, I think we all learned that we do this for the students, and the people who directly have the impact with students are teachers, paraprofessionals, the people who are with them every day. So we try to put as much money as we can there without jeopardizing turning in things to the state and doing the work that's required of us also. At this time, I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Hagler, who's going to talk a little bit about historical budgeting for our school division.
And as we go through this, it's not really to kind of ask questions and just paint a picture, not to blame anybody, it's just where we stand and what's happening. So on this chart, we're showing inflation, and where that data, this is the accumulated number as of 2025, not in there, we're in the midst of the year, but about almost 21% inflation in the last 5 years. I think some of you could look at some of the things you're buying right now, or your electrical bills or something else, and say it's a lot higher than that, but this is an average accumulation, so. However, our county funding, and now this is just our operating fund. This is what we do every day. This is where all the teachers, maintenance, bus, this is where we do everything each day. The change in our county funding has gone down by 2.7 million over the last 5 years with record inflation. We've been balancing our budget on state increases, which I'll show you in a minute, but it's getting harder and harder. We've made cuts, we've done this. It's like, how far can you go? I will make a note, that over that same time period, the county has increased funding to our maintenance reserve fund. Twofold on that. That's gone up by 3 million over the last 5 years. That has gone in there for 2 reasons. One is to help us with our facilities. and maintaining some things that got backlogged during the recession. Number two is we have this thing called reversion coming up, in which we're receiving a favorable funding from the state right now that will go away in 28-29 to the tune of $8 million. That will just be gone overnight. And so, not to put any board on a hot seat to find $8 million of cuts at one time, we are building that up in that reserve fund, doing projects, but that will shift over to operating at that time. So I want to commend the Board of Supervisors for recognizing, helping, and moving for that. But our operating fund has gone down, and the inflation and the other things that you've seen there. So I just wanted to kind of paint that picture and kind of what we're dealing with. The next chart kind of puts that with the inflation and the state funding, and then two of our big movers in our budget are health insurance and also our salary increases. So salary increases over that time period is 18%, inflation's 21%. You can look at that chart and say, our salary increases have not even kept pace with inflation. So in real dollars, our employees are probably making less than they did in 2020. State funding has gone up 33%, even with, and I will say this, yes, we've had decreased enrollment. We talk about that when we do our projections. And so even with decreased enrollment, the state has contributed 33% more towards us. I will say when the state calculates our numbers, a lot of our funding comes from a variable calculation. For every student, you get a certain amount. Some are fixed. I use this as an example. If you were to cut 20 students, if we go down 20 students, people say, well, you can cut out some cost. Well, that's one student per school. And I'm going to receive $150,000 less from the state. I don't know what budget cuts I can make in one given school when I'm losing one kid. You can't go down an aide or a teacher. So it's accumulative. We have made cuts. I'll show that later. But when you put it in perspective, we lose state funding right away for every single kid, but you cannot get that back in cost cuts right away. That's very difficult. And then health insurance, 13% in 5 years. I'd argue that's pretty good considering what other people have gone through. We've kind of managed that pretty well. I will note that based upon our self-funded health insurance, we will be recommending another 7% increase in health insurance this year, going into next year. So that's going to add pressure to the budget going into next year. We're going to the next slide here. So this is real dollars. I've showed some percentages. These are some other things that are big movers in our budget and what's happened over the last few years and how that money's changed. You can see the state up $19 million, that's 33%. And if you look down at the bottom of that revenue line, we're up about 17 million in its entirety, up on the state and then down on the locality there. On the expenditures, I show the salary increases, health insurance, but here are some other ones. Software is up 55%. That's almost entirely due to inflationary pressure. We put more money into sports. We put the transportation pressure on fuel prices, and also buses are costing more. In the last 5 years, buses have gone almost from $100,000 to $135,000. We got to maintain our fleet. Maintenance, cost of repairs, and people we bring in to repair things, that's up 44. Utilities. I got my electric bill in December, so there's a lot of pressure there. So there might even be more pressure there going forward. And then federal and other. The point I want to make here is when you look at the bottom line over the last 5 years, our revenues are up 17 million, our expenses are up 21. That doesn't bounce. So in the last 5 years, we have eliminated 53 positions and $3.4 million from our budget to make ends meet on our budget in 5 years. So we are adjusting our budget down for enrollment loss, but even beyond that, so we can give the raise of 18% and do other things in our budget. So we do recognize that it's been hard, and so that's where we are right now as we move forward in real dollars of what's happened in the history of this. And with that, I think that was my last one, Karen.
So the goal of this presentation was really just to highlight the history of our budget revenue and expenditures over the last 5 years. While our rankings and per pupil expenditures and teacher pay are at the bottom in the state, I do want to just say the work that we are called to do is really about students. And I want to again recognize the people that make this division 36th in the state for student achievement, working really hard, staying with us through the hard times for lower pay and fewer resources. The reason we wanted to share this information was really to show the board and the community how the school board has prioritized students in every budget. And this has really paid off for us in academic achievement, which we can see. We're going to be recommending asking for funding for this year's budget in order to compensate our staff, in order to retain them, in order to provide our students with the resources to give them the experiences that maybe over and above the everyday core stuff that we're required to do. So we're going to continue to focus on students and having them have the best education possible. Before I turn the presentation back over to Mr. Hagler to present this year's budget recommendations, we are happy to answer any questions you may have about this historical presentation. Okay, Mr. Hagler. Oh, sorry.
No, I don't have a question, but I do say thank you for putting this, because we hear so many different things about, well, you guys need to do this, you need to do that. We have. And this is all fact-based of what you just showed. The good news is we're still 36 out of 131 for student achievement. I think one of the things that I want to make sure we highlight, and I think you did, but when the governor goes and says 3% increase, we don't get funded for 3%. We get funded only for SOQ positions at 1.5. So all of those overages where we have said as a board, we need to focus on student achievement, anything over that SOQ number, we are only funded at 50% of the SOQ. Everything else, we have to fully fund. So I think that is important as we go into this budget discussion to understand why you're going to see some of the numbers that you see. So.
Great. Board members, I believe, and I'll just say for anybody watching, we're going to scroll it on the screens for who's here. But if anybody's watching online, these documents are available on the board docs under the agenda item for tonight. So you can follow along with these. Each board member, I think, has a sheet, so you don't have to look up, and it'll be easier to follow along. The first sheet we'll look at is just in how we build a budget and how I approach building a budget. We start off with the previous year, and then we start making adjustments to that. So at the very top, you'll see the current year's budget, 24-25. This is only the operating fund that we're going to address first and move down. Federal, I put at the top because on the most part, federal, if I get more revenue, I go up on the expense. If I get less, I go down. So it's a one-for-one trade-off there. It really doesn't affect the bottom line. And we adjust positions and spending accordingly. The board members will approve those grants as we apply for them. These are just estimates of where they'll come in next year. Slight difference on the ESSER 3 because there was a line item left in there from last year that shouldn't have been, but everything else is one-for-one reductions or increases. As I said with reversion, I mentioned that before, the county is putting in an additional $500,000 each year until we hit that final year. Our board committed to putting $600,000 aside each year. So you'll see that I'm reducing the operating fund by $600,000 this year to make sure we're ready for reversion in the future. That money can be spent on maintenance projects out of the maintenance reserve fund. And those reductions that we are moving into there on our own out of our budget makes up that $2.7 million reduction in our operating fund. We're reducing it to prepare, but we don't have anything flowing into there to help us with other things that are going on. The CVCC, no dual enrollment, this was coming out of the state. We have dual enrollment where our teachers are teaching kids in the classroom. If down in the green area, we would usually pay CVC $400,000, they'd get us $285 back. Those both go away. So that's a positive gain for us. $400,000 less in expenses, $285 less in revenues, but we come out ahead on that. And we thank the state for recognizing that. None of our kids have to pay for dual enrollment. That is being taught in our schools. The state change, when I look at the governor's proposed budget, an increase of $1.1 million from the state next year. That's, we are having enrollment loss there, but that's the increase. Interesting to note that if we did not give the 3% increase, we would forego 1.5 million. So that would be a negative number if we don't give the 3%. The 3% is tied that we're saying we're giving it. If we don't give it, we don't get the money. So that number would be a negative number if we don't give the 3%.
Well, and if we don't give it, we just fall further behind.
Yes, sir. Yeah. In the region and the state and everything else. But I just wanted to tie that all the state money doesn't come unless you do certain things. It has strings attached. So if you get down in the green area, the way I approach a budget, these are technical adjustments. I would say these are have-tos. Really don't have a choice on these. Not a choice, but if we're going to do the 3%, what's the calculation? We have steps in our salary structure. So those two first line items add up to a 3% salary increase. A step plus a COLA to get to 3%. It's not a step plus 3%. If you put those two numbers together, that's about 2.5 million. As I mentioned before, the state's given us 1.5 million. So to do a 3% increase for our employees costs, we got to come up with $1 million to do that. Staffing standard changes, as I said, if we have changes in our enrollment, we have prescribed staffing standards that automatically go into effect, and we actually see increases in changing based upon each individual school and what Mark Blankenship projects for the schools. He usually presents that in November, December, so I use those numbers. And you can see there's about a recommendation of 6 reduction in staff members there, mainly at the aide level, and that's mostly in the elementary schools. The flu shot, it's a small line item, but our nurses used to give our employees flu shots. We'd order them, and then they would administer them. Don't know if that's entirely appropriate. All of our employees under our medical plan can go to and get the flu shot for free. So that's under our pharmacy plan, and so that can be done for free. So we're going to eliminate buying those. Sometimes there was, I wouldn't say waste, but we would buy them and they wouldn't show up, and we're just donating those flu shots at that time. So we're going to eliminate that. I don't think our nurses should be doing that, and so did the staff. Bus leases, under the finance committee, we're committed to, we used to lease purchase our buses. We would lease them for 7 years and own them for 15. So it would take 7 years to pay them off, and then we'd run them for another 8. We decided to start moving out of that because of interest rates going up and trying to save on that. So we put a plan in that last year we bought 2 buses, next year we buy 4, then 6, 8, and we got to get back up to 12 to maintain our fleet. Didn't do it all at once because it had been over $1 million to do that. So as our leases roll off, we buy more buses, and that's going to cost us a little bit in the short term, but in the long term, it's going to save us a lot of money on those interest charges. So this is just a plan to get us out of that, and that's another $70,000 next year. Prices of buses going up, so for those 4 buses, it's going to cost us $32,000 more than it did last year. Adding in middle school sports, the board took action in July this year, 24, to add middle school sports. And so that's the cost that we factored into that, to add those sports. That was not in the original budget. By adding that in at the beginning, I have to build in that into next year. I mentioned before the health insurance rate increasing by 7%. We typically split that percentage increase between employees and the board. Typically, we use an 80-20 split. The board takes care of 80% of the increase, the employees about 20%. If you get too far off of that, then the 3% will not cover, the 3% salary increase will not cover the increase in insurance for our lowest paid employees. So we want to always be mindful of that. And then software. Software is not anything new. We do purchase software sometimes in multiple year contracts to get big discounts. This is a year we have about 2 or 3 of those coming on, and then they come off in the next 2 years. So it's on 1 year, off 2 years. This is the year they roll on, so next year there would be about a $380,000 savings coming off the budget, and then 3 years later it comes back on. So that's just a cycle of the software. The yellow technical adjustments are when I do my second quarter forecast. I'll be presenting that at the next board meeting. I've already reviewed that with the Finance and Budget Committee. But this is where I'm looking at the budget and saying what's actually happening in this year's budget compared to what did we budget and what are we actually experiencing. So liability and workman's comp is increased 77,000. Health and dental technical adjustments. This is where people are moving between plans, more people participating. I plan for a certain amount, but what insurance are they taking? Family plans. So that's about 145,000. Salary is a big decrease. Each year I look at what our salaries are coming in at. The biggest savings that you should experience every year on salaries is you have turnover. You have people retiring at the top of the scale, highest paid, people coming in at the lowest. I just don't know what that's gonna be, so I'm always 1 year behind on capturing that. I actually look at what's actually coming in and then build that into the following year's budget. So about $587,000 of just technical salary adjustments there. So that's good savings. Per the SOQs, as Dr. Woodford was saying, we looked at where we were staffed for English language learners, and we were one under. My mid-year forecast already kind of adjusted for some of this, but that was at mid-year, so another 31,000 for the other half a year for that, to recognize that full position coming in there. And then other technical, the Finance and Budget Committee, they had a whole list of this, but this is about 20 line items. 10 of them are going up, 10 of them are going down, and in total, they add up to about $100,000. I do have a list of that. If any of the board members want to see that, I can send that to them, but that would drag this on for a long time, and it's like a $5,000 here, $10,000. They're just smaller hitters on that one, so other technical adjustments there. So the green and the yellow are technical, which I believe are almost have-tos. The blues are requests that came through the committee to the full board. There may be other requests. Mr. Hill wanted me to make sure that for the rest of the board, you're hearing this for the first time, if there are other requests or there are other items that you want in the budget, please feel free to ask and discuss that either tonight, call us during the week and ask for calculations so we can come back next Thursday and be prepared to discuss those. So this is coming from the committee, but it's the whole board's budget. So if there are other items, please make that known to us and we can do the calculations and have that ready for the full board to discuss next week. But on these coming out of committee, Google domain, as we go forward, what used to be free is no longer free. So some of the services you either have to pay or you lose them. And these are security features to the Google domain. I would almost make a point that this is probably almost mandatory rather than in the blue area. Restoration steps, so those that have been on the board, we froze STEP for 7 years. And we've restored almost all of our employees. There's just a few groups that have not been restored their steps. They are still owed 6 steps. So those small groups would be clerical workers, maintenance, bus garage, and health workers. On that, no one at director or above would get any restoration steps, just letting the full board know that. So that's below director, anybody that would be owed a step. Cost of living, as Dr. Calvert was saying, we've fallen behind the area. So the committee said, what would it cost to do another 1% above the 3%? That's $845,000. And so they're recommending that. As you noted, if you remember back from her slide, that won't even move us one step up. But each percent is a large number. So it's recognizing that, but that's what that would cost. Security equipment replacement cycle, mainly for our cameras. A lot of that has been dependent upon grants. We don't always win those grants, and we don't have a replacement cycle, so we need to build that in to make sure that when those cameras fail, we can replace them and maintain that equipment. These are some smaller ones at the bottom, stipends for 501 coordinators. We have stipends we give out to a lot of staff, but 504. Did I say 501 again?
You did.
I'm sorry. I'm in taxes here. 504 coordinators, they take care of our medically fragile kids and have meetings and do a lot of extra work, but none of that's recognized. They're just doing that all for no pay and a lot of work. It's almost like going through an IEP meeting for special education. There's a lot of work and paperwork, so it's recognized in that. And that's not a lot there, but to recognize that. This is the SROs. We have budgeted right now $200,000. We're paying 33% for the 14 SROs that were awarded to the sheriff in a grant. That will come to an end in 26, 27, 27, 28. I'm not sure which. Once that grant comes to end from the state, we will have to pay 100% of the cost. So our budget is right now $200,000. It will need to go up to $800,000 or $900,000 here in the next few years to pay for all those 14 SROs. Those will be on us.
Right in time with reversion?
Yes, sir. All hitting at one time. My recommendation to the committee is, instead of, like with reversion ending, instead of having to come up with all that money at one time, let's go from 200 to 400 this year and the 600 the next year, and you take incremental steps to get there, we can use this $200,000 on other equipment and security and anything else we might need while we're doing that, but it can shift over towards the SROs at that time. And then finally, we have administrators in the elementary schools that are assistant principals. They're on 11-month contracts. There's a lot to do during the summer to prepare, and there's a recommendation to move them to 12 months. I kind of went through this pretty quickly, so I'll take a breath and get a drink of water here and just see if you have any questions on that first page or comments or any recommendations for us to do other calculations or bring anything back.
Well, I had a couple. Gov School has been using Lynchburg College. They had a contract. In the meantime, CVCC had that where they don't charge. So can we put a little pressure on Gov School to say, hey, let's go back to CVCC as opposed to Lynchburg College so that we don't have to pay as much for the Gov School?
There was a reason why they moved it and changed it, because there was.
Because CVCC was charging them a lot, and Dr. Smith talked to them about lowering that price, and CVC said no. So he went to Lynchburg College to and signed a pretty decent contract with them. But then in the meantime, the governor made it so that we don't have to pay for CVCC classes now. And so the Gov School could go through CVCC as opposed to Lynchburg College and save a lot of money, which hopefully would trickle down to.
So why isn't that done through the board at the Gov School to force Smith to do that?
That's what I'm wondering, if we can do that.
And I would have to ask Dr. Smith, because the state has told the community colleges to fund any dual enrollment in the actual high schools, but I didn't think they were doing any dual enrollment at regional Gov schools. So I'll follow up with Dr. Smith, because he must be getting some different information. I have a Roanoke Gov School meeting on Monday, and I'll ask if they do Virginia Western, what they're doing with Virginia Western and their dual enrollment. So I'll
Yeah, if
check
you can
into that.
find out, I mean, I'm happy to make a motion at our next meeting, but I don't know what all of the details on
Okay,
how can he get out of the contract with Lynchburg College so that he can go.
right, because he signed a 3-year, right, I think, maybe, and, okay.
Basically, from what I understand, he has his instructors, but they are dual teachers for
University of Lynchburg.
for the University of Lynchburg right now. And so then it would just basically make them dual teachers at CVCC.
Yeah, because the fees, and it's been a year or two, the fees from CVCC went up.
Right.
Yeah, and now they're down, now they're zero, so we should go back to that. The other thing is, I'd like to understand, and get an answer from, if we eliminated Chromebooks from elementary schools, elementary school students, and just have them only in the middle and high schools, of course, the teachers would have their Chromebooks and have their access to everything. How much money would we save? And then also, if we only had Chromebooks in the classroom and the kids could check them out periodically, but they wouldn't just take them home, step on them, cram them in, how much would we save if we didn't have each child having their own Chromebook at home, but just have them only in the classrooms, and access to them at home only through checkout or special projects or whatever? How much money would that save us in the county?
For the added middle school sports, 370,000. What was it before?
That was adding middle school sports, but the biggest cost that we added there at the beginning of the year was for 3 athletic trainers, because we only have 3 athletic trainers, 1 per zone, and we've been adding middle school sports, and they're spread very thin. So the biggest cost increase was their recurring cost of 3 athletic trainers, but we added, Dr. Cornett, what sports did we have for middle school?
Middle school cross country, middle school track, and middle school competition cheer.
To each of the 3 middle schools. And I guess my question was, what were we spending on middle school sports before?
I don't have a dollar figure on that, but we're supporting certain programs. This was to expand the programs that we had, and I'm not sure
We
what.
also added additional coaches. We added an assistant coach at each middle school sport, comparable to the JV and varsity sports. So I think that was $30,000.
Yeah, I think he was asking what sports did we have at middle school
Well, no,
before we
I
expanded?
guess what I'm saying is, that we added to our budget $370,000 for middle
Yes, sir.
school, right?
Well, middle school and the athletic trainers are gonna help out at middle school, but also at the high schools. There will be some
Okay.
sharing there, so it's probably,
And I'm not complaining,
Yeah.
you know me, I was putting some money on sports, right? But my question is, I guess, what is our total middle school budget now for
I'd have-
sports? Do you know?
no, what sports do we cover in middle school?
A lot of them. I mean, there's a list I could start naming.
Okay.
We
Majority.
could get that
It's
from the-
mainly the
I'm just curious
stipends,
what
it's
we-
mainly the stipends for the coaches and the allotments out to the schools and then transportation. So that's typically makes up the bulk of the cost. The schools do a lot of fundraisers and.
And there's a lot of
yeah,
volunteers, I mean,
yeah,
there's a
yeah.
lot of people that are volunteering their time. I'm just curious, and again, I'm not complaining, I'm curious at, you know, with that added 370, what is our new middle school
Spend.
sports budget? You know, how much are we spending on middle school sports total?
So we can bring that back also on the Chromebooks, bring that information back. We can provide that out as soon as we have it, so you have it even maybe before next Thursday, but we'll work on that as quickly as possible. Because that's a little bit easier, I think, on the Chromebooks, if things are eliminated, and I'm the accountant here, I'm sorry. But then you have to buy textbooks, do we have enough money to go out and buy hard book textbooks to supplant all, you know, to replace it? We gotta do some calculations on that, and the instructional team will do that, so we can bring that back for
And I
next week.
think, you know, seeing a, you know, $370,000 increase is great, but it looks even better or worse when you see what that is compared to what it was, right? So understanding the growth or
Yep.
whatever.
And I think, like Mr. Hagler said, we have to be careful with that athletic trainers, because they're still based at the high school, but
Yeah.
they're splitting now. So we can cover all.
So,
We would allot that out between high school and middle
so
school.
how many athletic trainers do we have now?
Currently, we have 4, but we haven't been able to fill 2 of those positions.
So the goal is to have 6 though?
Yes, sir.
Two for each middle school, high school combo?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I guess what was happening is there was multiple events at multiple locations. And you know, they
Well,
had an injury here. and then
Even
they-
at the high school level, there were
Right.
multiple events
Yeah.
not being covered. And then you throw the middle school, they were getting very little.
Well, I've seen what Hood does at Stanton River, and he's there late at night and he is running around, he's working his tail off. Every,
All 3 of our trainers are.
They were probably needed before you expanded middle school sports, but expanding middle school sports just exacerbated that.
help that out.
And so we packaged that together with
Okay.
that, so.
I mean, that's good, that's good.
Before we switch to the next page, any other things that we can
Yes.
calculate? Yes, sir.
I'd like more information on the SRO position, and from my understanding, that was awarded as a grant to the sheriff's office, and that allowed us to take on, 14 additional SRO officers, and, you know, to a certain date, and then it's going to become our responsibility, correct?
Yeah, the first year the grant was 100% paid by the state. And if you think about how long it takes to advertise, hire, and bring people in, the first year went by with maybe they had 1 filled. It took a long time to get this program going. And so the state didn't have to spend any of that money. Then it was 33% for the next 3 years, and then it's 100% on the locality.
So is that a grant from the state?
The sheriff applied for that grant to the state.
Okay.
So the county is seeking reimbursement from the state for those SROs, and they're receiving that in to balance their budget. The 33% is coming from us.
And is this a grant that can be requested again?
There's talk about security and what they're gonna do, and even the government, I don't know what's gonna happen within 2 years. Does the state say everybody has to have an SRO at every school and they fund it? There's a lot that could happen, but grant funding's not guaranteed. So when this comes up, it's either funded or it discontinues, and
Well, didn't we agree that we would pay 75% and then the county's gonna use them during the summer?
So that's true, we're not paying, they pay the entire cost for outfitting,
Okay,
the equipment. And I think they give them cars too, so they're paying for that. And then we don't bear 100% because they do have access to those SROs for 2 months during the summer. So we're gonna be paying the full cost really for 10 months, but not the outfitting and all of that. So yes, sir, that's,
okay, just wanna be transparent.
and the county fiscal department bills me for that and keeps accounting for that.
I was just making sure that the grant wasn't such that once you hit this date, you have to keep paying. You know what I'm saying? Like you say, yep, I agree, you'll pay for this amount of time and then we'll pay for this amount of time versus it just stopping and maybe we could get another grant.
We're still gonna go.
It's a grant through the sheriff's office, so you have to pursue that. It's his employees, he's paying them, so, we're gonna get billed for them.
We're in a difficult position with that because, number one, everybody wants an SRO in the school system and that's reasonable. You know, in today's climate, the kids deserve that protection. Parents want that protection. I guess the question is, in a tight budget, how are we supposed to absorb that cost? And are there some creative ways that we can look at, you know, transitioning and getting that funding? The grant's not guaranteed, you know, why is it all falling back on the school board? You know, does the county not want that? Parents surely all want SROs in the school. That's something that we need to be brainstorming about to fund it, cause it's gonna be a growing expense that.
And that was my idea of putting it on here, so it is in front of the board, that this is coming, rather than me dropping something like a year from now.
It's not an educational
It's not an educational position.
It's a community safety position.
It is, and I would say, you know, once again, I don't wanna pass blame, but the state's doing it through grants. Either they believe in it or not, or what do they believe in is the best security thing, but it's like, they're just, here's a grant, but not here's recurring funding, let's get this done.
Bottom line, we've been told we have to pay for it. We can't sit and wait and get an $800,000 bill. We've gotta start somewhere.
Right.
If we can get grants, that's great, but we've gotta have it in this budget.
Be putting money aside while in parallel, we're
Correct.
trying to figure out a better way.
Yes, but this is kind of preparing for what's gonna happen.
No, that's
That was the whole purpose of saying, this is coming and it's coming quick.
yeah.
I mean, we need to be prepared. That's why that dollar amount is truly, this is what we need to go ask for and here's why.
So the red number at the bottom is, for all this to happen, the blue, the yellow, the green, we need another, if you just round it up to $4.3 million to make this budget work. If we don't receive $4.3 million and more funding from the state or from the locality, we're gonna have to make cuts. Like some of these blue items might have to go away. And then we might even have to go further than that depending on what's happening. So that's the reality of what we're facing right now. And we can switch to the second page here if you want. For those that are listening, for everybody here, these are not recommended cuts right now. Let me say that aloud. These are not recommended cuts. But if funding doesn't come through, these are potential things that our school board will have to consider. These add up to more than a 4.3. The finance committee asked the executive staff to do some calculations to say what triggers, what things can we do if we're short on funding? What items can we look at? So we've done some calculations. These are what ifs. These are not currently in the recommendation. Let me reiterate that. But if the funding's short, these are some of the things, and there might be some other things, but these are some of the things that we've come up with the committee. And those are for the board members to take a look at. And if people are looking at this and saying, you're cutting this, and we're not cutting that. We're advocating for funding so we don't have to make cuts like this. This is the idea behind what the committee wanted to accomplish. And as you go down there, the one thing I have on there is eliminate all the blue items on that first page. And that would save $1.4 million. And then you can see a lot of the big movers on there is decrease in staffing. 85% of our budget in the operating fund is salaries and fringes. You can't do much on utilities. You gotta replace your buses. You've gotta pay for fuel. You don't have much maneuver. You don't have a lot of discretionary funding really in the operating fund. You have a little bit. But I'd say over the last 5 years, we've cut a lot of that out in that $3.4 million cuts in the last You know, those were positions, but we've had other cuts too. So these are just ideas. None of them look good, but when it comes to it, we're gonna have to make choices to balance this budget. So I don't know if you want me to go down each one or just let the board look at these over the next week and just consider those, or is there anything else? I think Chromebooks is the one we'll add to this list, from what we gathered tonight. Is there any savings to move to that? Middle school sports is just a calculation, it's not necessarily savings. Is there any other items the board would like us to consider?
I just have a question. So would any of these cause a decrease in funding? In other words, you know, one of the options on here is close a school, save $840,000. Would closing a school decrease funding?
The only funding it would decrease is, I'd have to look at how they fund maybe a principal, but on the support positions, not as much. The only other funding we receive by school is for technology I think we receive a certain amount for every school we operate, for our technology replacement cycle for Barry Sexton and the technology department, so there'd be a little bit there if the school was not operating. But
It's negligible.
yes. And this is, you know, the calculation there for closing a school, I put a name there, it's just a rough calculation. When you think about if you close a school, the teachers and the aides and the support go with the kids. It's mainly the support, principal, custodian, clerical worker. You're reducing those. That's where the savings is, nutrition workers and stuff, because you don't have to shift all those to the other school. And then long-term, what's not in here is the long-term maintaining of that facility. So the board has spoken on that, and that's not a pretty option either, but that was a calculation we had from last year, and we just added it in there, so.
I just wanted to make sure it wasn't counterbalanced by some loss in funding, but
Might be a little bit, but not to that extent.
And those, Randy, those are recurrent savings.
That's recurring
850,
savings.
That's not the hard assets of the building.
Not for the roof and the HVACs and stuff, that's a recurring savings that we kind of calculate. Yes, sir. Mainly the electrical savings, the fuel savings for heating it, and the positions.
in the school, I know there's someone listening and it's a possibility people are gonna get upset, but we're talking about options here.
Yep.
You know, let's say there is a school that closes and you save 800,000. Can we go over again what the opportunity for selling that property is?
It used to be that in the past, I think about 8-9 years ago, as long as the county really doesn't, you gotta be careful. If the county had a need for that building, it might be that you'd work with them, but school boards can't sell property now, real property. It used to be that we couldn't, we had to turn it over, but now we can't sell it and you work with your county and stuff, so we could sell that property, yes, sir.
And we would be able to use that money
As
in
long
our
as
operating budget?
as long as the board of supervisors appropriates the money for you to use. They have to appropriate money. That's the legality that happens. If any money we receive has to be appropriated by the board of supervisors, or I can't write a check. So it's working in conjunction with that.
So these potential ideas in reduction would all be reoccurring for the most part.
That's what we were focused on,
Right.
yes.
So if we did them all, which I mean, nobody wants any of these to happen at all.
I think all those add up to over $7 million.
Yeah, $7,240,922.
We weren't just trying to get to that number, we're saying you could pull different levers or different triggers to balance if you don't have the funding, and that's what the board would have to struggle to figure out what to do.
And what you're saying is that immediately, really, we need 4.2, just as of now.
From that first.
Just as of now.
Yeah. And even if you looked at that, if you were to cut out the blue, just say you're not gonna do any of those blues,
It's only 1.2.
you know, that saves you 1.4, you still got
Quite a bit.
3 million, 2.7 million, you still have to cut. And you can't really go into the green and yellow, it's kind of low, so technical.
Can you explain what eliminating testing coordinators means exactly?
Woodford?
So, we have testing coordinators that, do all of our SOL testing. We used to just have high school testing coordinators because testing is so tied to graduation, so they do a lot of work with not only SOL testing, but CTE testing, AP testing, all of that. When the state required us to do growth assessments 3 times a year in addition to SOL testing, we knew we needed to provide some help at the elementary and middle schools. So it's the person who actually codes all the tests. They it's a lot of coding, a lot of requirements with the state. They actually make sure the tests are started on the computers, they're stopped, they're closed out. They make sure there are no testing irregularities. It used to be that our counselors did that as just part of their job. And during testing time, that was all they were doing. Which, when it's just the spring SOLs, that's one thing. But with growth assessments, we were doing 3 or 4 weeks of fall testing, 3 or 4 weeks of mid-year testing, and then 3 or 4 weeks at the end of the year. So we added testing coordinators. We are hearing from the state that with the new accountability system, that we might not have to do growth assessments. We still have to do something because the General Assembly says we do, but it may not have to be like the SOL type. So our thought was, well, we could go back since we're not doing as much testing and bring those positions offline and then have someone else in the school added as a duty. So.
We could just cut out SOLs, right?
Well, I can't.
So what about using librarians for doing some of those testing coordinating?
Appropriating staff.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, we'd have to think about that and,
I know they did that at EC Glass.
yeah,
They use librarians during the testing time.
yeah.
If we were gonna consider cutting that, could you guys present an idea of how you would do whatever testing we have to do still? And I think most of us are for only doing the testing we have to do, right? Like, we all agree we do way too much, you know? So maybe just a plan for how you would handle especially if we don't need to do all the testing that we were once doing, right? The reason you'd establish those
Right.
positions, right?
And that's specifically just SOL and growth assessments. I mean, we're still required by the state to do some type of benchmark 3 times a year. We're required to do. Now it's K-8 reading screening. So we still have a lot of required tests that our testing coordinators don't support, that our other, we do have volunteers supporting. So yes, we could.
Dr. Woodford, Dr. Calvert, can you guys address the third line item there, and what ramifications there would be to increase class size 4 through 12? Eliminating 17 positions is what this number's calculated on. What would that mean for the teachers that are left behind, and how large would the classes get on the upside? And
I'm remembering correctly, we did not add one to K3. We added one to 4-5. So 4-5, I'm looking at the staffing standards. 4-5 is currently 22, so it would go to an average of 23. That's an average, which means some classes would be higher and some classes would be lower. Middle school, it's on Randy's cut sheet if you can. Middle school is currently 22.5, it would go up to 23.5 on average. And high school is 25.75, so it would go up to 26.75. So it'd be full.
And that's about as far as we can go before we miss
Don't
our
need the
SOQs. We can't go against our SOQs, so that would be probably as
We
tight as.
kind of did that calculation to show you what a one change would be.
Yeah.
They're
You can
not,
extrapolate from that, what would a half be, what would a quarter be, in smaller moves, but we just wanted to give you an idea. A full one would do this. And it depends on where the school is, and I'll let them take over. Because you could change that, and a school might not lose anybody in our calculation, because it depends on how close they are to their next one, because we round up. So if you're well above, if your percentage is like 14.96, then it goes down to 14.45, you still get 15 teachers.
But it's
It's a
gonna
one,
impact the smaller
but there is
schools.
savings there, yes.
Yeah, I was gonna say, as we know, it impacts our smaller schools the most, and really, when I say impacts, the board has to make a decision, because you've got those small schools that might be on the cusp of, they've got 25 kids in a classroom, and nobody likes that, but do you go and make a class of 12 and 13? And then you have your larger schools that can make that, and they have 22, 23 in a class. The other thing is their middle and high schools, what they're gonna do, because kids need to pass English, they have to do the math, the science, the history, they'll start cutting their elective programs, which is why our kids come to school. That's what they love about being in school. So those are the ramifications, as we were thinking through that we would see by making larger class sizes.
What I would ask is anything that we have on here, we all need to understand what is the student impact, bottom line. And if it's not worth the dollar amount that's showing up there, we've got to come up with something else. So how does it impact a student?
I had a question on the last item. If you close Suzie Gibson and utilize CVCC, CTA,
I got cut off Academy, yeah.
it cuts 25 positions. You had talked about closing a school and having to move all of the people and just not have the principals, but this would be a little different because that would be completely closing the school.
Oh.
And those kids would just go back into whatever, but then they would go to the CVCC, which would be free of charge except for
It's
transportation.
tuition. No, it's tuition, but we factored that in. We looked at the tuition for the exact same number of students who we currently have at Gibson to pay the tuition for them to go to the CTE Academy. And we would still have that, a little over $1 million, because you're not moving those teaching positions to a high school like you would if you were closing a school. You still need those teachers. The teachers are already at CVCC and the CTE Academy. I would predict that we might have a lot of kids who would say, I don't want to go to CVCC all that way every day. So our enrollment may go down. We might look at some of our more popular programs and centralize them, like cosmetology, a huge waiting list. We could do 2 or 3 classes of that. We would consider putting that at a high school, centralized or something. So I think there are lots of things we could play with. Obviously, we're super proud of our Gibson programs and our CTE programs. I think what we were doing is, okay, we've heard from the community that closing, schools that kids are in is hard on them. So we looked at what buildings, what facilities do we have that people aren't so, their heart's not as tied to maybe.
I'm all for CTE, but if we can get the same programs a lot less expensively. Now, I know that there's a CVCC branch here in Bedford, isn't there?
That's for early college.
That's for early college, and
So it's not the same. So they'd have to go all the way
You
to
gotta
Lynchburg.
remember, we've
Okay.
got Stanton River students who are not gonna wanna travel to Lynchburg every day.
Yeah.
And
The
that's not
CTE
fair.
Yeah, the CTE Academy also, they have just like Gibson has specialized equipment, like for HVAC and those. That's why they have the CTE Academy, because they have very intense programs, welding, things like that. Just like we have those programs here, we have the programs with so much of the equipment here at Gibson, because there's not as much room for those like an automotive program, we couldn't, it'd be really
That
hard
was
to
gonna be
do.
the question I was gonna ask. We have, like 400 kids and
Um,
how many kids?
we have, I wanna say it's 240 total for
So, I mean,
morning
you
and
said,
afternoon.
okay, but could they take all 240 kids?
That would be a question we would have to ask them. They may not be able to. They've been trying to get us, they have so many programs. I think there's a diversity in programs. Could they take all of them? I don't know.
And
honestly.
what about apprenticeships instead in some of those things? Wood companies in Bedford, in Stanton River.
I think the only thing that we would be concerned about would be you have to have the CTE hours and coursework to get CTE completers, which is part of our high school graduation requirements. So there are sequences and requirements when you do CTE courses that can only be done with teachers marking off competencies and things like that. You don't have anybody to do that in an apprenticeship who would certify
And
that.
transportation concerns. So I don't wanna keep focusing on this. These are things that we asked them to give us as examples. It doesn't mean we're gonna have to go chip away at this. These are just things for us to be able to think about, to say, what could we cut if we had to?
Can you remind me, what is our revenue from the county?
Dollar amount?
Yeah.
For this year? It's 30, I'll pull it up, Robert. I'll pull it up right now. Percentages, not dollars. Total, including all funds, is 39.3 million.
And Mrs. Purvis asked me yesterday, we were talking about what percent of the county's budget goes towards the school system. Mr. Hagler and I talked about that today. We don't have an exact number. I think calculating a few years ago, it was under 50%, but an exact percentage, we don't have.
Um,
I'd have to request that from my counterpart
I
over
know
the
the
county.
average is 51%.
For the state?
For something like that, for each county, 51%, like over 50% usually goes to their schools.
And just to be truthful here, I mean, of that amount, 5.4 million is going into the maintenance reserve. So we can do some facility stuff, but to prepare for reversion too. So the end of reversion is a burden. There's been increased funding from the state for 15 years. It's gonna be coming to an end. So, we're preparing for that wisely, both the county and us. So it's the operating fund that I've been kind of highlighting tonight, though. So about 33.6 million for the operating fund. And we get about 80 million this year from the state. And then we got a little bit of other and then also federal money coming in, but those are the two big numbers.
And Randy, remind us, what's the dollar amount that we get from the town of Bedford?
I don't know. The county collects taxes from them, but that does not come directly to us. When they were a city, I did charge them, but that's before reversion. So that's, they're charging county.
So that would come from the county?
Yeah. The county's probably collecting, I believe, I'm not sure if it's one bill to the residents of the town where the county collects both for the town and for the county and they have to revert it over to the town. I'm not sure. It might be going down happening that way, but the town collects money from the county collects money from the town, from every resident of the town to fund the whole county too, after reversion.
Back to the CTE, would Stanton River be able to utilize a community college in Roanoke as opposed to?
So there are some stipulations with regional programs. The way it works is that certain regions are tied to certain community colleges. That's to enable community colleges to serve, an area and we don't infringe and all of that. Typically, our region has always gone Central Virginia Community College. So I would have to look into that. I don't even know if Virginia Western has a CTE academy though, but if we were to want more information, we'd have to
I don't wanna get rid
ask.
of our CTE program at all if I can, but I'm just looking at, we had to, how can we service these kids?
These are just hypothetical options at this point anyway.
Got 2 more pages, if any more questions or comments on this, okay. We'll bring some additional data back on that. Since we focused mostly on the operating fund side, there are 3 other funds that are in existence that we deal with every year. 2 funds that I don't really deal with, which is construction, where we have borrow and self-funded health program. But textbook fund is in good shape. We're preparing work with Dr. Woodford, with our current contributions to that, we should be able to take care of any adoptions we have for the next 6, 7, 8 years. So it looks like our funding levels there are good.
Can I ask a
Yes,
question
sir.
about that? This is gonna sound crazy, but do we use textbooks? Because I've never seen my kids have a textbook before.
So in recent years, we have done a lot more digitally. So we get classroom copies of the hardback books that kids can check out if they need to or use in the classroom. And then all companies now are providing the digital.
So this textbook fund is for their digital.
Yes.
We buy a 7-year license. Typically, it's negotiated by the state of Virginia with companies that they approve. And then you might get, like in the younger grades, consumables, and they'll replace your consumables, your workbooks every year, but the main text is online.
So the software and things that we get for the Chromebook, is over here, but then we're buying textbooks that are then digital for their Chromebook, right?
Right, so there are textbook adoptions like for, the core curriculum piece. Then we do have some additional softwares that we purchase just to support additional resources, giving teachers a little bit extra in resources. We have some software for our music programs, things like that don't come in hardback textbooks, things like that.
Okay, sorry,
No,
I've
you're
never
fine.
seen them use.
It's a good question. Hardware and software that are business software or supporting programs are all the operating. The only thing that comes out of textbook is content. So it's digital or hard textbooks. The reason you don't have to have this fund. The reason we have this fund is it's just like preparing. I come to you next year, we gotta do a math adoption, I need 1.2 million in my operating. We're building and making sure we're funding it and building up to that. So these funds build up for when we have to do those large expenditures.
So this textbook fund is just for gonna be, we're gonna be replacing math, so we're gonna be using this for math? It's gonna cost us $1,232,000.
No, this is just the budget for the year. When you look at the budget, I'm looking at the revenue coming in and maybe the expenditures. In a year that we do an adoption, we actually spend a lot more than we do in a given year. So it fluctuates. Some years we don't do an adoption, so we might spend $300,000 or $400,000 out of the fund. But we're accumulating money in there, so there's more money in there. But when I set a budget, I'm looking at the revenue I'm gonna bring in, and I set it at that. But we have accumulated funds that I can pull down and spend when we do a large adoption.
Is it generally more expensive to do the online or do textbooks for everyone?
I don't know that there's really a difference. I mean, right now, you are gonna
Textbooks can
get.
be used for more than 7 years.
Right, but the digital just automatically comes with any textbooks we get. On average, when we moved over to the digital and classroom sets of text, the adoption was about the same. They're getting their money one way or the other. The other pieces in the textbook fund that aren't where we do big adoptions, every year we commit to GovSchool, early college, we purchase textbooks, and we all know when you're in college classes, the professors like to change the textbook every year, so we have to buy almost every year new textbooks for our dual enrollment kids, GovSchool, that kind of stuff. Susie Gibson, they have some consumable textbooks for CTE that have to be consumable because they're marking hours and so there are some just textbook fees we have every year no matter what, because we're replacing, but.
It's crazy that we have to get new math textbooks. That should be the same since the beginning. Nothing's changed.
Every time the standards
SOLs
change, SOLs change, standards change, what comes in, which grade level books, that kind of
They
stuff.
don't do math like we used to do.
Very kidding.
I can't do it.
I can't even help my kid.
So yes, on the textbook fund, anything left in the account at the end of the year, which is probably gonna be above $1 million, gets reappropriated and added to this, and we can spend that down at any year. This is just, how much am I gonna recognize more or less in revenue?
We've
over
gotta
the year?
have it.
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it makes sense.
Okay, nutrition fund, this is, once again, it's not showing the beginning or ending balance, but what's the budget and what are the changes there? Been talking a lot about this fund with the finance committee. There's some pressure on the nutrition fund. Inflation has really hit that pretty hard. increase in salaries where you gone to minimum wage has gone way up. Staffing and what's minimum staffing, we are looking at that we're probably gonna shift some staffing around and see some cuts there to get more levels in places. But I've shared with the finance committee overall, the strings that we have, the strings that come attached with the money hamper you. And I don't know if this will be self-sustaining indefinitely in the future. If it doesn't kind of get closer to that level, we have reserves right now. But if it continues to go in the direction it has been the last 2 years, eventually we're gonna have to shift operating money over to nutrition to make it whole. So we're doing all we can, been working with the finance committee, we've got ideas, and we're gonna try to curtail some expenditures there.
Well, isn't there something in the state too, Randy, that's going around nutrition right now? Free,
Yeah, there's,
and I use air quotes.
I will say,
It's free.
it's not free, but every kid there would be no charges for kids. So that's been floated in the state. I don't know if that'll make it through or not. There's a lot of things there. In either the House or the Senate that I've been watching. They won't all make it through, but we'll see what
So
happens.
some of our schools are already no charge, right?
They are, but
Federal.
the complicated, and as the finance committee will attest to you, if the entire school is under no kid pays, we don't get the same back from the federal government for every school. It depends on their level. So one school might get $2.20 back, and one school might get 80 cents back for every kid that goes through. It's mind-boggling of everything you got to go through, and
And that's not necessarily what the cost
Right.
is for that lunch. It's like,
And before we make a whole school that way, there's calculations and estimates and assumptions that I work with our supervisor with to see if we're gonna lose a lot of money or if it's a break even or
And
something.
look, I don't wanna make light of it, because we have students in Bedford County who do not eat unless they come to our school
That's
every day.
right.
So I'm not making light of that.
Yes.
What I think is federal, state has created a monster when it comes to nutrition. We gotta figure out how to deal with it. Because we're losing money, which just doesn't make sense to me.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
We might need to grow our own crops.
Good luck with that.
The maintenance project, that's just the budget for next year, and I've got another sheet on that coming from the facility committee. We are recommending with this budget also that the entire board, at the same time they pass the operating and all these other budgets, the 5-year plan, CIP plan. And so that's on the last page and for you all to look at. I've kind of used the same kind of color coding. The things in blue have been completed. Things in yellow should be done by the summer of '25. And the items in green by the summer of '26. The ones that aren't highlighted are in progress or we're talking about or working in the future. So this is an idea for schools to know when things may be coming, but for the full board to take a look at that, provide any feedback back to the facility committee of any changes. One change we did add, I'll make note of 2 things on here. At the very top, we put the construction fund. That's where we require borrowed funds. That's working with board supervisors to borrow money to get these bigger projects done. The maintenance reserve is we're taking care of roofs, HVACs, boilers, and parking lots. I'll make one final note on this. With reversion, if you look at the very bottom, the 27-28 year is the last year reversion is in effect. You can see $8.7 million going into the maintenance reserve fund. That will all shift over to the operating fund the next year for that cliff. And you can see in 28-29, we'll have $0 projected. We can deal with that. It can't be there. We're gonna have to do, but I'm just saying there's no plan for that. We're gonna have to do something. But if we don't put dollars in there, we're not gonna be able to do projects long-term. So not only reversion, not everything have you heard tonight, but long-term funding of our facilities will become an issue that we're gonna have to solve in the next 5 years.
we've gotta be strategic. You know, I see construction fund, $6,000 for a bus garage. But we also just got off of a conversation about Suzie G and CTE. You know, to me, we go build that bus garage and we put it at Suzie G to grow our diesel and grow our programs. But if we're even contemplating having to remove CTE, it doesn't make sense to go build a $6 million bus garage at Suzie G. You know, does that change the conversation? So,
Some things are intertwined and you got 3 or 4 years, so you don't wanna do something and then like, wait, if I knew that, I wouldn't have done it.
and again, let's be clear, those are just conversations. That is nothing that we are even remotely ready to move on or have discussions around. Those were just options that we asked the executive team to give to the board so we could start looking and asking questions.
Yeah, and on this sheet, the things that in the color are in progress being worked on, or architectural drawings are being done, and when we're projecting things to be done. So those things are in full swing by my maintenance department. Things below that are 2 or 3 years out, can be shifted around or moved around for as we see fit.
Nice job, facilities committee, putting this together, and, you know, us being able to see what we're actually spending money on and what projects we're getting done. We used to talk a lot about stuff, now we can show this is what we're doing and we're getting it done. So I appreciate the fact that you guys put that together. Any other questions? Okay. Do I have a motion for adjournment? We have a motion by Mr. Daniels. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Kubak. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned.